Let's start with the idea of individualism. The most radical intellectual change in liberalism involves how it views the individual. The postmodern left views the individual as being absolutely free and absolutely sovereign in deciding all morality, regardless of tradition, religion, natural law, or even the good of society. You see this viewpoint not only in the postmodern philosophers in France, so Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault, but also in the contemporary philosophers of American liberalism in our universities, which have been enormously influential over the last 30 years. People like Michael Walzer, Ronald Dworkin, Richard Rorty, who were directly influenced by these French postmodern philosophers who developed the philosophy that I gave you, particularly the idea of the free individual. Now, this view of the individual is not the same as a classic liberal understanding of someone like John Locke or Jefferson and Madison. It's not how individualism in America through our history, rugged or otherwise, was understood at all in the American lexicon. Followers of Locke, followers of Madison and Jefferson, they believed that the individual was endowed with rights by God and by natural law. There were objective constraints on the individual imposed not only by society, but also by morality and also by religion. Jefferson and Madison were not followers of the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, a forerunner of the postmodernists who believed that the radically free will of the individual alone decided what was right and wrong, regardless of what God, regardless of what natural law had to say about the matter. Now, wedding this new idea of freedom, what I call radical individualism, this is the way I kind of keep all these ideas straight. You've got to give them a name. This is radical individualism. Wedding these ideas with socialist notions of equality is the essence of what the postmodern left did in the intellectual transformation of liberalism. It is a radical individualism tied to the ethos of socialism. How many of you have heard of Noam Chomsky? Chomsky is a poster boy for this. Chomsky says, I am a libertarian socialist. Now, anybody who knows anything about ideas knows that libertarianism and socialism are at the opposite end of the spectrums. One believes in the radical freedom of the individual, and socialism believes in no freedom for the individual at all. Yet he sees what I'm talking about here, he grasps it, and one of the reasons why most people think he's so brilliant is because he did this. He took these two intellectual traditions that had historically been on opposite sides of the spectrum, fused them together, and said, I'm all about radical freedom and justice. Oh, that sounds good. Social justice and radical freedom. And personal radical freedom, too. I can do anything I want. I get to define who I am and what I want. That sounds pretty attractive. And on top of that, I get to insist that other people must agree with me. And if they don't, I can have the government fine them or put them in jail. Amazing. In identity politics, what you see here is people get to define who they are. And since their personal views and desires hold sway over everybody else, it's their interpretations of what discrimination is that becomes the equivalent of a social mandate, a demand on the claim of opinions of others, a demand on what you are allowed to say in the public square, enforced by law. So, and also not just behavior, but speech. Now, once this demand that I'm talking about here, and I talked about this a minute before, once it becomes considered to be a social right, which it is, the argument is over because rights in the American constitutional system can become law. In the brave new world of the left, people must accept the personal opinions of certain kinds of people. This is a momentous change. Equality is no longer about economics, but it's about where you stand and the great cultural conflict between the new official groupings of society.